Remember when a night at the movies meant neon lights dazzling outside the cinema, the distant aroma of buttery popcorn, and that electric hush as the big screen flickered to life? The 1980s weren't just a decade. They were a living, breathing blockbuster, bursting with unforgettable characters and soundtracks that seemed to pulse through every radio and roller rink. These were the days when we first met outsiders who became heroes, witnessed heart-thumping chases set to synthesizer beats, and believed, if only for a moment, that a phone call could truly reach another planet. Films in the 80s weren't only stories, they defined our dreams, our friendships, even our wardrobes, inspiring kids and parents alike to quote punchlines that still spark laughter today. Can you still feel the thrill of hearing a favorite movie theme before the opening credits? Or recall that bright, sticky theater seat as you hid your eyes during another unexpected twist? Let's step back into that cinematic era together and rediscover the silver screen magic that shaped a generation and still lingers with us today. As the clock turned to 1980 and America slipped out of a restless, unpredictable 1970s, nobody quite realized how radically the world of movies was about to change. The decade began with a nation cautiously optimistic, eager for fun, escape, and heroes, and Hollywood was poised to deliver like never before. The classic movie-going experience was already deeply embedded in our culture, but what set the 1980s apart was the overwhelming sense of possibility, both within the industry and within the hearts of its audience. At the start of the decade, an evening out at the movies wasn't just something to do, it was the main event, a communal journey into stories stranger and more wonderful than anything experienced before. The late 70s had planted the seeds. George Lucas's Star Wars from '77 and Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind not only shattered box office records, but hinted at a new kind of modern myth-making, bigger, bolder, and more technologically daring. By the dawn of the 80s, studios began to understand the power of the summer blockbuster, but the formula hadn't quite taken hold. Films were still diverse and, in many cases, deeply personal, a melting pot of genres and creativity. The industry was caught between the grittier, adult-driven realism of the 70s and a dawning fascination with spectacle, special effects, and stories that could capture the boundless imagination of the young and the young at heart. But that's not all. Underneath the marquee lights, rapid changes in technology and economics were shaking up Hollywood's foundations. The introduction of multiplex cinemas meant more choices under one roof. No longer did you have just one or two screens. Now there might be 4, 8, even a dozen glowing softly in the evening. Rentals were surging too. By 1981, home video recorders, bulky Betamaxes and VCRs began appearing in middle-class living rooms. Suddenly the theatre wasn't the only place to catch the latest blockbuster. You could rent it, rewind it, and relive it at home whenever you pleased. Did you ever have friendly arguments with family about which films to record over those precious blank tapes? Or recall the magic of a Friday night, picking a movie from the corner video store's wall of colourful boxes, then reveling in it together on your own couch? Even as film reels kept spinning in projectors across the country, the newly booming cable channels like HBO and Showtime started to blur the lines between home and theatre. Yet nothing could quite replicate that feeling of anticipation as you walked up to the ticket window, clutching cash and listening to the crowd's excited buzz. For the first time, studios began to see the immense potential of global marketing tie-ins, action figures, lunch, boxes, comic book spin-offs, and more. A movie wasn't just a film, it could be a pop culture event, a phenomenon with staying power and reach. The 80s also introduced us to the weekly ritual of movie trailers in theaters and for the first time on TV. Commercials teased upcoming releases during prime time, turning moviegoing into an event to be circled in red on the family calendar. Can you remember the thrill of catching a glimpse of a new Steven Spielberg or John Hughes film weeks before its release, trading predictions in the schoolyard or at the water cooler the next morning? But you might not believe this. In 1982, the year E.T. took the world by storm and made Reese's Pieces a must-have candy, Hollywood released more than 400 major films. And yet, the year ended with a shocking fact. At least a quarter of those films lost money. The stakes were higher than ever, and studios learned quickly that a single, crowd-pleasing hit could keep the lights on for years. Directors, screenwriters, and producers began to experiment with genres, romantic comedies blended with fantasy, horror with suburban nostalgia, science fiction packed with human drama. Some movies cost more to produce than entire studio budgets from a decade earlier, a gamble that sometimes led to dazzling profits and other times financial heartbreak. The decade also saw the emergence of the high-concept film, a simple, universally appealing idea that could be summed up in a single sentence. Think about it. A teenager goes back in time and meets his own parents. Back to the Future. Or a cop teams up with an alien nation. These films were tailor-made for television promos, magazine ads, and, most importantly, mass appeal. Did you ever find yourself drawn into a film just from a single catchy tagline? Cultural and technological evolution wasn't limited to the studios. Audiences themselves changed. Gen Xers and Boomers now attended movies with kids in tow, introducing a new generation to silver screen adventures. The 80s were also a time when the local movie theater was often the center of the social universe. Saturday matinees and midnight showings of cult classics became treasured rites of passage. At some small-town theaters, a single movie might play for weeks on end, lines wrapping around city blocks, bringing together neighbors, classmates, and even strangers for a shared 2 hours of laughter, tears, and thrills. And speaking of communities, the 80s introduced us to the summer movie season as a true event, a calendar bracketed by Memorial Day and Labor Day, packed with releases that aimed to top each other week after week. Studios jockeyed for those prime summer slots, pushing tent poles with bigger effects, brighter stars, and more merchandising than ever before. But have you ever wondered how much of your summer vacation memories are soundtracked by the very movies that played in those dark, cool theaters? You might be surprised to learn that some of our most beloved 80s films were, at first, considered risky bets by studios. Back to the Future bounced from studio to studio before landing at Universal. Ghostbusters was thought to be too weird to attract a wide audience. And yet, these were the very movies that went on to define a generation. The magic of the era wasn't just found on the screen, it was born out of the willingness to take chances and invest in big dreams. As the world shifted beneath Hollywood's feet, movie makers responded with daring innovation, unforgettable stories, and a perfect blend of fantasy and reality. The result? A cascade of timeless films that became cultural landmarks, quoted endlessly, parodied lovingly, and handed down as treasures from one generation to the next. Having set the stage, literally and figuratively, we'll see in our next chapter how technology itself became as much a star as the actors on the screen. Because if the beginning of the 80s was about a hunger for bigger stories, the years that followed would be about creating illusions that astonished and sometimes bewildered audiences everywhere. So, how did the tools behind the camera shape the look, the feel, and even the sound of the movies that defined the decade? Stick around because the special effects revolution is about to begin. As we journey back through the unforgettable stories, iconic performances, and groundbreaking innovations that defined 1980s cinema, it's impossible not to feel that subtle ache of nostalgia an echo of laughter in a crowded theatre, the shiver of anticipation as the lights dimmed, and the way a single film could unite friends, families, or even an entire generation. The 80s weren't just a chapter in Hollywood history, they were a moment in time, when the movies felt both larger than life and intimately personal, offering a dazzling escape but always bringing us back to something real in ourselves. We've revisited how the earliest years of the decade set the stage for an explosion of creativity and how visionaries behind the camera, wielding both new technology and boundless imagination, crafted films that reached into the very heart of pop culture. From the heartwarming adventures of E.T., the pulse-pounding exploits of Indiana Jones, and the laugh-out-loud camaraderie of Ghostbusters, to the coming-of-age glimpses into teenage life in The Breakfast Club and Fast Times at Ridgemont High, each film captured a unique corner of the decade's spirit. These movies were more than just entertainment. They offered a mirror for our hopes and fears, shaped trends, and provided endless references that still light up our conversations and our memories. There's a reason hearing a familiar theme or seeing a classic movie poster can instantly transport us back to a moment in our own lives. A summer evening at the drive-in, a spontaneous friends' night out, or even that well-worn family tape played over and over on the VCR. But as we look back, it becomes clear that the true magic of 80s films lies in their staying power. These stories have become heirlooms, handed down to children and grandchildren, still making us cheer, laugh and cry decades after those first screenings. Maybe it's because the characters felt like friends or rivals we grew up with, or because those movies gave us permission to believe, just for a little while, in time travel, flying bicycles, or that the underdog could really win. They brought wonder into our living rooms and made the extraordinary feeling just within reach, right there among the sticky floors and sweet aroma of movie popcorn. How do you think these movies shape the way you see friendship, adventure, and possibility? Which moments still make you smile, laugh, or even tear up today? I'd love to hear what movies from the 80s hold a special place in your heart and why. Please share your favorite scenes or unforgettable movie nights in the comments below. Who knows, your memories might inspire someone else to revisit an old favorite. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next nostalgic adventure. If you have friends who lived through the magic of the 80s, share this video. Let's rekindle those glowing memories together. After all, in the movie theater of life, there's nothing quite like reliving those blockbuster moments with the people who know them best. And as the closing credits roll, remember, the screen may go dark, but the stories and our memories keep shining bright, frame by frame, in the hearts of everyone who loves the movies that defined a decade.